What is a water? The world for him is like a water to a swimmer. A swimmer swims in the water. He enjoys the water. He floats because of the water, but he knows that he is not the water. The presence of swimming, water in the swimming, is not an obstacle for him. It is a mean and method of relishing being in water. Similarly, a yogi in this world is not at all discontented with the world. He accepts the world as it is and finds nothing wrong in it, nothing that is disturbing him. He takes everything in stride, the poverty, the hunger, the injustice, the love, the affection, all is taken in stride. Nothing creates commotion in the mind. Look at our own life. We are constantly stretched in the strife of life. The good, the bad, the nice, not so nice, the pain, the happiness, the wants, the desires, the fulfillment of desires. We are constantly stretched in all directions in this world. It is no more an enjoyable swim. It appears to be a very difficult place to live. And when one is so much involved in the world, being tossed around by the absurdities of the world, then to expect him to be having yama niyama or a sthira sukhasanam is next to impossible. We all hurriedly try to get out of our busy life and try to sit for pranayama and also sit for meditation, but it doesn't happen. Nor will it happen. Howsoever we may try to sit in one place and try to sit for even 1 hour, it will not give us any results. Because if there is no canvas, a painter cannot paint. Even if he has the colors with him, the brush with him, he needs a canvas. So, for the pranayama and dhyana, we need a canvas of peaceful, contented life without strife. One who is at peace with himself can only think of utilizing the peace of mind towards higher goals. If the substratum is under storm, we cannot achieve anything. And to create the canvas, to avoid the storms, to create the peaceful or the tranquility required for pranayama and dhyana, yama niyama are absolutely indispensable. We saw the yama niyama as a mahavrata, how difficult and how tight they are, how strict they are, but that need not discourage us. We can start working right away on yama niyama in our life, and it's not that difficult. All we need to do is don't try to change the world or the circumstances. The biggest mistake we all do is we try to change the circumstances so that I can be happy. The art and the tact of being peaceful is exactly opposite of it. Let the world be where it is. You change yourself. Gandhiji was given a tight slap by one of the followers. First he did was not to challenge him, change him. He accepted it and made a change within himself to take even a slap as a thing that happens in this world. No ill feelings about the person, no ill feelings about the world, no commotion, no discontent that I'm trying to help everyone and they're trying to give me a slap. No thinking of that kind. Taking it in stride, he moved forward. So, in spite of all the commotion in the world, he was always at peace. The humongous freedom struggle, the arrests by British officers, it never disturbed his morning prayers. Because no storm in the world can upset you if you have decided to remain rock solid amidst the storm. So don't try to change the circumstances around. Change yourself or your way to respond to the changes around. Think of it as Hari Ichha. Why would somebody rob me of few thousand rupees? It's because of my own karma in the past. So if I am retributed for the karma that I have done through my prarabdha, why I should have a complaint about it? And why that should disturb me now? Deal with this world only when required. Do not deal with the world when not required is the simplest rule to extricate ourselves from the world. You're sitting quietly in a chair and an insect comes and bites you. It's part of prarabdha. Deal with it. But because we have free time, don't try to jump around and attend to the clubs and friends and relations and increase the acquaintances and increase the networking and do the stupidity of upward mobility. All that is inviting new karma. Every karma is a loan taken from the world. Don't be a debtor. Don't increase the loan from this world. Whatever has been borrowed from the world, start retiring it. Once the balance sheet of life in terms of karma goes towards lower and lower balance, then the practice of yamanema becomes more and more perfect. Be minimalist. Be happy in whatever little we have. Ask a question to yourself. What do you need in the morning to be happy? Just the thought that you want to be happy. Your clothes do not matter. Your wealth doesn't matter. What matters is how are you in the present? Are you thinking about the past? Pull back the mind because it is useless. No one in this world has ever changed the past. Then don't brood in the future. What will happen? That will happen what is supposed to happen based on my past karma. The only kal that I have in my hand is present, vartamana. Be in present and be open and receptive to whatever is happening around. Nothing in this world should shake the inner water or the tranquility. It's an art. Once we start mastering the art, the mind goes in a peaceful mode. When this practice of peaceful mode is achieved, then one can move forward towards focusing on visible manifestation of the vital energy or the cosmic energy in our body. This recognition of vital energy in our body is called prana, which is presently scattered helter-skelter and moving in all wrong directions, which needs to be controlled or restrained. We do the ayam of the pran, resulting into pranayam. How do I know that my pranas are not working properly? I have a digestive problem. I'm suffering from constipation. The vital energy, the prana around that area called apana is not working properly. That's why we are suffering. I have a cardiovascular problem and a blood pressure and suffered from an heart attack, or my cholesterol is moving up. All this is happening because the vyana is not properly controlled. And since we cannot perceive the pranas working, though they work, the only perceptible form of knowing what pranas are doing is respiration. Shwasa prashwasa. By knowing one's shwasa and prashwasa, you can diagnose what the pranas are, in which stage, what are they doing. I'm breathing very fast. The pranas are disturbed. Anxiety is the result. The body shakes with tremors. There is sweating. I'm appearing for an interview. The thought got projected into the interview. What if my interview doesn't go well? The fear started coming. Anxiety increased. The pranas got stimulated in the wrong way. The adrenal glands are excited and activated. A huge amount of adrenaline is released in the body. The body has started shaking and sweating. The fear has engulfed the mind. The pranas are in the worst possible situation. Observe the breathing. We will be able to perceive the state of prana. Smooth, long, steady, unilinear speed. If that is what the respiration is doing, you are definitely regulating your pranas and bringing them to normalcy. We all are breathing abnormally. One may find this as a joke, but it is not so. In this world, except the small child or the infant, no one except an accomplished yogi breathes properly. We all have faulty breathing. And faulty breathing indicates faulty application of pranas. So the step taken by the yogi is to make the abnormal breathing normal. And once the breathing is normalized, then through breathing, the pranas are redirected in a different flow. The pranas flow in a particular manner in the body. The flow of pranas is through subtle channels, not the nerves, not the arteries, not the veins, but the channels called nadi. They keep flowing through the nadis. That is how the sharir or the body is maintained. Now imagine you have eaten a lot of food. Medical knowledge tells us that heart directs majority of its blood towards the digestive system, because now the digestion has to be done because you have eaten a ton of food. So it compromises the blood in muscles, in brain. That is why you feel little sleepy after a huge meal. You don't feel like walking. That is because now body doesn't want to spend any more oxygen or blood on any other activity other than digestion. As a result, the pranas get directed towards the digestion, and the prana that gets directed toward digestion is a samana prana. So the samana is under overwhelming activity. Now imagine a yogi who never eats more. He is very frugal in eating. He eats very little. What happens to the prana, the samana? Now the samana is not so much dedicated to digestive system, so its work in the physical aspect of the body is reduced. A yogi sits in sthira sukhasanam. The muscles do not require the blood. Except the mind, nothing is working. So the circulatory system is also going very slow. Digestive system is not working because he's not at all eaten too much, or he's in the morning Brahma Muhurta. The musculoskeletal system is not asking for any more blood or oxygen. As a result, all the pranas do not have external work, and then they start accumulating. Now the pranas are not running through 101 nadis to look after everything. Rather, they have come back from those nadis to the mula sthana. It is an energy that has come back from dissipated channels to the central place. Now it has much more power. Now this particular prana can be redirected in a different channel by pushing the pranas, by giving a jolt to the pranas. This art of conserving the pranas at a central place and giving it a jolt is pranayama. Now you are doing ayama of prana, restrained, resisting, controlling the prana to direct it. How do I redirect it? That is where Patanjali Maharaja's Golden Sutra comes into the picture. Shwasa prashwasayoho gati vicheda pranayama. He says, prana, if you want to control, first stop the dissipation. Meaning what? Cut off from all the activities, mental and physical. So the pranas are now not moving outwards. The hand is not moving, the legs are not walking, the digestion is not happening, the circulation is at its minimum, the brain is not much thinking about past, future, present, only mind is active. At that point of time, now focus on prana. But sir, I can't see prana. Then see the visible manifestation of prana, which is respiration. Because respiration cannot be stopped. That is why part of the pranas is constantly being used for breathing. Now focus on the breathing. The last dissipation or wastage of prana is happening through breathing. Control the breathing. How do you control it? Breath is going out and breath is coming in. Both require lot of prana. So stop the incoming air, stop the inhalation, stop the exhalation. To that extent, prana will be conserved. But sir, if I stop both, I will die. The yogi says, I know I will die, so I'm slowly practicing it so that I am able to stop the outflow and stop the inflow of the air or the vayu. And when the vayu is no more required to be drawn in or forced out, that is the point of time when pranas now are in a huge quantity at the Mooladhara Chakra. The energy has come at one central place. Now you are able to push it up. In fact, as we keep on doing pranayama, the apana vayu, which is normally directed downwards, mainly involved in excretion and perineal activities, starts getting pushed upwards. And like a wave of water, how a wave of water goes, in the similar manner, apana goes upwards in a wave form, goes and right up to the mastishka. It gives a good amount of push or a jolt. This jolt of a prana from the muladhara, that is close to the perineum, apana going upwards and giving a jolt to the shirodhara, the sahasrara, or towards the upper end, is called udghata. We all know the word udghatan. Udghatan is opening, inauguration. Inauguration is you open a door. Udghatya. The word udghatya is to open the door. So this udghat, this particular push, initially it is slow, then more, then more, then more. As the udghata becomes more and more, breathing becomes less and less. Because from there the pranas are getting conserved. So what is the process of pranayama then? First, acknowledge that I'm breathing wrongly. Then learn how to breathe. Then start opposing the breathing, both inhalation and exhalation. Then bring inhalation and exhalation to zero, to the complete stoppage. So that is how the pranayam or the pranayam is done. So the first step of pranayam is to learn to breathe properly. Now, what is this breathing properly? We have all been breathing. Then what is proper breathing? A proper breathing is, breathing involves an apparatus called lungs, a passage called nasal passage through the throat, and the air that is outside. Now, as a jiva, upadhi, when we breathe, there is a standard breathing which is inherent in nature. Ours is an altered breathing. Why the breathing is altered in us? Because we have altered because of gunas. If I'm dominated with Rajoguna, my respiration also gets dominated by Rajoguna. If it is a Tamoguna Pradhana Prakruti Shariram, so breathing will be also Tamoguna Pradhana. So how do I breathe? Observe yourself. And now I'm going to use medical terminologies to explain. Pranayama is such a beautifully perfected science that the pulmonology or the respiratory system study has found perfectly same thing what the yogis have told hundreds of years back. Observe the way you breathe. We have always what is called as a shallow breathing. We keep breathing, but they are very short inhalation, short exhalation. That is called tidal volume. When we say tidal volume, remember how much breath you take in one breath, how much air you take in and out is called tidal volume. Unfortunately, we take breath or the air in and out only half a liter, 500 ml. So our tidal volume is only 500 ml. This is called faulty breathing. Now just imagine, if you want to breathe in completely and make your chest full of this particular inhaled air, which is normal breathing, then the quantity that is inhaled alone is 3,300 ml, 3.3 liters, 6 times more than what we breathe. In other words, Every time we are breathing 1/6 of what we should be breathing. Why? We are accustomed to that breathing. But why? Because of constant exposure to Rajoguna, too much of eating and the obesity that we are carrying, all this requires prana's attention to the body more. If the physical body requires so much attention of prana, suppose I am 120 kilos, I need a lot of pranas to look after my cells. So naturally, my pranas are disturbed to an extent, so my breathing becomes extremely shallow. If you see very fat people, they are always breathing shallow, too shallow than us. In fact, that is called Pickwickian syndrome. Just because you are obese, you cannot breathe properly because the pranas are required for this maintenance, because too much of blood needs to be circulated. Too much of oxygen is required. That is why breathing also is required quite often. Deep breathing doesn't take place, their breathing becomes faulty. Every disease operates through this breathing pattern. So a tidal volume, which is a short breathing we do, in and out only is 500 or half a liter or 500 ml, while a deep breathing in, which is called inspiratory reserve volume, IRV in pulmonology, is about 3.3 liters. Similarly, when you breathe out completely to the last extent, completely emptying your lungs, the air that is propelled out is 1100 ml. So now, if we take this tidal volume plus inspiration plus expiration, it is called vital capacity of the lung. That means how much a lung can inhale, exhale, total, with full inhalation, with full exhalation, the total air comes to 4.8 liters. In one breath, we are supposed to take 4.8 liters. Actually, we are taking only 500 ml. That is 1/10. That is called faulty breathing. So first is you bring the breathing to normal breathing. Normal breathing, unfortunately, we call it deep breathing. The breathing is supposed to be normal, only supposed to be deep. But since we don't do it, we call these days that normal breathing as deep breathing. So first thing what we should do as a practitioner of yoga is have attention on breathing. But when I am speaking, when I'm going out, when I'm looking, when I'm eating, breathing is neglected. Yes, that is because of lack of concentration. If we keep concentrating on breathing, later on it becomes a practice and it happens automatically. But it requires practice, sadhana. So whenever we get time, in the car, you're alone, when you're traveling, when you're sitting, when you're in your bed, observe your breathing. Breathe completely. Don't try to do pranayama with kumbhak in the beginning. Just do what is called as deep breathing. And when, excuse me, 1 minute. So keep doing the deep breathing, which is the first step of normalizing the respiration. So in pranayama, we are bringing from abnormal respiration to normal respiration first. Then comes the question of doing the Rechaka, Kumbhaka, Pranayama, etc. So the first is deep breathing. Now, it is not that after deep breathing, you immediately jump to pranayama. Once the deep breathing is established, then we move towards alternate breathing. Anuloma viloma. Through one nostril, you are inhaling. Through another nostril, you are exhaling. So breathing in Breathing out alternately is practiced after deep breathing is practiced to a sufficient extent. You can imagine, you can estimate your own progress. How do you estimate your own progress of deep breathing? There are even methods where one can take tantu, a cotton fiber, put it in front of your nose, and when you breathe out, see to what extent the cotton thread is moving. The extent of breath that goes out tells you about the force with which it is coming and the distance that it is traveling. Then you can also time it. When you breathe in, initially you are not able to breathe in for a long time, but it slowly gets prolonged. The deep and deep breathing happens. So then your inspiratory reserve volume, amount of air that you can breathe in, increases to the tune of 5 liters, 6 liters, because you're able to breathe more and more. Mind well, this has to be coupled with the sthula sharira being extremely lean. Your diet should be absolutely sattvic diet, frugal diet, meat ahar, so that the physic doesn't dissipate the pranas. The physical requirements are brought down so that pranas are not much wasted in maintaining the body. Then only the pranas can be utilized further. So first is deep breathing by both the nostrils deep inside, exhaling as much as you can outside. So Puraka, Puranam is to fill in. Then Rechanam is to exit out as much as you can. What about the Kumbhakam? Kumbhakam is the most difficult part. It should not be tried right away. And most important, Kumbhaka can be stopping of breathing after you inhale or after you exhale. One may try Kumbhaka after exhaling, but after inhaling Kumbhaka should not be tried unless there is a guru around, because Antar Kumbhaka can result into lot of disturbances inside. It has to be handled very carefully. So in a normal deep breathing, where only Puraka and Rechaka, exhalation and inhalation is practiced, there is absolutely no issue whatsoever. Pranas are just touched upon in deep breathing. So that is why there is not much activation of prana, although deep breathing gives a lot of physiological effects. Health-wise, it will make you healthy, but prana-wise, it doesn't really do much, because deep breathing does not, it just scratches the surface of prana. Alternate breathing through either nostril is called Nadi Shodhana or Anuloma Viloma Pranayama. This pranayama is two-way. It goes in one nostril, comes out from another nostril. This is called as two-way flow. Krishnananda Maharaj and Temniji both have given an example of what is this alternate breathing. Imagine a pipe of water having crust inside. When the water flows in one direction, the crust is formed and it keeps forming. But when the water is going in one direction but coming in another direction, then bilaterally, both direction in opposite, it completely cleans or removes the dirt. Same thing happened, that the dirt that is there because of only unilinear flow of prana, with alternate nostril breathing, it invigorates the body from inside, and all the impurities are washed out as if two-way flow of water is washing a pipe. This analogy is taken by Krishnanandaji Maharaj, a master exponent of Yoga Sutra. So Anuloma Viloma is the second stage we practice. Deep breathing, first stage. Second is Anuloma Viloma or alternate. Now, alternate breathing, as I told you, deep breathing scratches the surface of pranayama or the pranas. Anulom Vilom touches little deeper. So we may get some results in Anuloma Viloma itself. The results are sometimes very difficult to describe. People generally say, I feel good. It is so refreshing. I'm feeling very nice. All those feelings are coming because the pranas are now getting directed in a normal channel. Mind well, we are not still in pranayama. We are regulating abnormal breathing to normal breathing. After these two stages are over, then we go towards what is called as redirecting the pranas, the pranayama. Now what we do is we start breathing either through one nostril or through both the nostrils, and coupled with deep breathing, deep inhalation called puraka, then wait at the end of the puraka for a very short time. Stopping the breath at the end of inhalation or puraka is called antar kumbhaka. You are waiting inside. When you exhale completely, rechaka, and stop, it is called bahya kumbhaka. Now, mind well, in this, what we are doing is we are taking the help of exhalation to stop. First, you exhale and then stop. That is bahya kumbhak. First, you inhale and stop. That is antar kumbhak. Now, the question is, in both the places, you are holding on to that breath and then stopping, because you need to do rechaka and then do the bahya kumbhaka, or puraka and then do antar kumbhaka. Such a kumbhaka is called sahita kumbhaka. Sahita means accompanied by. So bahya kumbhaka is accompanied by rechaka, exhalation. Antar kumbhaka is accompanied by inhalation called puraka. Why it is called sahita kumbhaka? Because it cannot happen on its own. You will stop outside only when you breathe. So putting the breath out and stopping, they are conjoined with each other. That's why it is called sahita kumbhaka. So initially deep breathing, followed by anuloma viloma, alternate nostril breathing. Then we move towards what is called as bahya kumbhaka and antar kumbhaka. And in this, bahya kumbhaka is practiced for a longer period. Antar kumbhaka should not be practiced for a longer period unless there is a guru standing there, because antar kumbhaka can create chaotic results because the pranas are getting stimulated. They are to be now redirected through pranayama. If the redirection is not done properly, then it can create havoc in the nervous system. And there are many examples of yogis attempting it in a wrong way, going mad. Psychological disturbances are noted. Even death can happen. That is why a good yoga guru, which is available everywhere around for common people, he would never advise to do antar kumbhaka. He will say bahya kumbhaka, rechaka, stop, fine. Puraka, for a very small amount of time, antar kumbhaka, and immediately start releasing the air. So we have puraka, rechaka, kumbhaka combination. What we have practiced in the whole thing is, first we practiced doing a long breathing, long exhalation, long inhalation. Then we practiced alternate breathing, leaving by one nostril, taking in by another nostril. Then we practice exhalation, stoppage, inhalation, stoppage. Now the whole emphasis is on reducing the breathing. Now long breathing is not required. Now the breathing has to become less and less and less. And what is supposed to increase? Non-breathing is supposed to increase. So in the initial phases, we exhale completely and stop. Later on, a little exhalation and the stoppage is long. That means kumbhaka period is slowly prolonged. As we prolong the kumbhaka period, the Puraka period and the Rechaka period, the inhalation and exhalation become smaller and smaller and smaller. An adept yogi requires very little breath in, very little breath out. The rest is non-breathing condition. Then such a yogi, when he further masters this art, he comes to a point where breathing has become almost negligible. Non-breathing or kumbhaka has taken the entire place. Further, he practices under the Guru's guidance. And at that point of time, he realizes that he need not breathe. So what remains is only stoppage of breathing state. He doesn't require any puraka. He doesn't require any kumbhaka. He doesn't require puraka, doesn't require rechaka. He is only in the stage of kumbhaka. Such a kumbhaka is called kevala kumbhaka. Kevala kumbhaka is the ultimate achievement in breathing. And keval kumbhaka means no breathing. It may sound absurd, but it is a fact that yogis remain in kevala kumbhaka for many months to years. There are many types of yogis doing different sadhanas. When they master keval kumbhaka, some of them also adopt certain practices. Pavahari Baba, in his early part of yoga, he was a yoga par excellence. Vivekananda was so impressed with him that he wanted to learn the yoga from him. This Pavahari Baba, in his early period of sadhana, when he was mastering this Kevala Kumbhaka, he could remain in Kevala Kumbhaka for many months. So what do you do? Because people will keep saying that this guy is not breathing and he's there, and they will be surprised. There will be crowd, chaos and disturbance. So he is to dig in the ground, a deep hole of about 12, 13 feet, go down in the pit and remain in Kumbhaka for many, many days. There is no exaggeration. There is nothing that is being said which is imaginary. It is possible. And mind well, lower the breathing rate, longer the life. In fact, we saw in Patanjali Yoga Sutra itself, while studying karma, that jati, ayu, bhoga, these three things are decided by karma phala, out of which ayu is decided by number of breaths in a particular life. We also see that in the nature. The longest surviving animal is tortoise. That is because they breathe very slow. All powerful, charging, fast, speedy animals die faster. The tiger dies faster. So does the dog. So does the cat. So does the snake. But tortoise, elephant, those who are slow, those who breathe very slowly. So by simply mastering your breath, one can prolong life. And when you master the breath, when it becomes very slow in number, a normal respiratory rate is about 12 to 14 per minute. A yogi breathes for, the respiratory rate of a yogi is 2 to 3 in a normal circumstances. And when he's doing pranayama, it can go to 0 because he's in Keval Kumbhaka. And the ones who has a lower respiratory rate, his heart rate starts dropping considerably. Most of the yogis, the heart rate comes down to 19, 20, 15, and sometimes it stops altogether, like in case of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So breathing is that important, pranayama is that important. Keval Kumbhak gives complete mastery on the prana. And then when this breathing in, holding and breathing out, holding and breathing in, when this practice is going on, one has to observe what is happening. And that is why Patanjali Maharaj gives the next sutra, which says, Bahya Abhyantara Stambha Vritti Nirdesha Kala Sankhya Bihi Paridrushto Dirgha Sukshma. Sometimes one wonders how this great yogi Patanjali Maharaj gives such a packed information in such a tiny sutra. He says, Bahya Abhyantara Stambha Vritti. Bahya means Rechaka, Bahyascha. That pranayama which stays outside, Bahya pranayama. When you are exhaling, when you are doing Rechaka, what is the pranayama we are doing? We are actually doing Rechaka, but Rechaka means you are forcing the air out so that you are not letting the air come in. So you are doing Gati Vicheda of incoming air. So when you are exhaling, actually you are opposing inhalation. And when you are inhaling, you are opposing exhalation. It's a little reverse way to understand. So forcing the air out is Rechaka. But the real pranayama is Rechaka is stopping the Puraka. Because the definition of prana is Gati Vichedana. So when you are breathing out, you are not doing Gati Vichedana of breathing out. You are doing Gati Vichedana of incoming air. So Rechaka stops the Puraka or Gati Vicheda of Puraka. So it is a pranayama. Similarly, Puraka stops the Rechaka, outcoming air. When you're breathing in, your outgoing air is stopped. That is pranayama. And when neither the incoming air is coming, nor the outgoing, that means both are stopped. That is Kumbhaka, that is called Stambha Vritti. Stambha means like a pillar, nothing, it is not moving. In the sense, neither inspiration is allowed, nor expiration is allowed. The Shwas and the Prashwas, exhalation and the inhalation, both are stopped completely. So now it is clear. Rechaka is stopping the Puraka, so it is pranayama. So the Gati Vichedan is of Puraka. When I'm breathing in Puraka, Gati Vichedan is of Rechaka, so it is pranayama. And when I am not breathing, that means I am opposing both incoming air and outgoing air. Puraka, Rechaka, both are opposed. Kumbhaka takes place. Kumbhana is to resist. Purana is to fill in. Rechana is to fill, is to force out. That is how the words have come. But one must remember, Patanjali Maharaj has not used Puraka, Kumbhaka, Rechaka words. These are taken from the Smriti literature. It is by logic these names have come. As far as Patanjali Maharaj is concerned, Shwasa, Prashwasa, Antarscha, Bahyascha, and Stambha Vritti. These are his words. So now, Patanjali Maharaj in this sutra says that this pranayama is having three characteristics. Desha, Kala, Sankhya. What are this Desha, Kala, Sankhya of pranayama? When you breathe in or breathe out, there is an extent to which the breathing goes. When it goes in, that also goes right inside up to the alveolus, the last part of the lungs. And when you breathe out, it goes to a certain extent. This is called space occupied by the breathing. The spatial component is called Desh or Pradesh. How much the breathing out has covered the area around me is called Desha. Now, this is generally 1 cubit. 1 cubit. Dvadash Angula, 12 fingers is normally where the breath goes. But yogi, after very much of practice, is able to throw this air to a great extent. And not only throw it to a great extent, he can even have the power, entire prana he can put into that breathing. So when he breathes powerfully, a person standing at quite some distance may fall instantly. If you have seen most of the Chinese or this Buddhist movies of Japan and all that, where you see that there is a monk who breathes out and then tries to oppose somebody, the person cannot walk towards him because of the force of the air. That much is the spatial configuration of a accomplished yogi. So desh is the first thing. You increase the desh slowly, 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 because the breathing becomes one. Powerful means the pranas become directed through the breathing. The breathing of a yogi, when it comes out with a force. The desha can be, the space can be little larger. Kal, how much time you spend in Puraka, Rechaka, and Kumbhaka. Now, the Puraka, Kumbhaka, Rechaka normal ratio is breathe in, if it is 1, then you hold for 4 and you breathe out Rechaka for 2. 1, 4, 2 is the normal ratio. Breathe in, hold for 4. 1 second you breathe, 4 seconds you hold, 2 seconds you exhale. 1 minute you hold, 1 minute you breathe in, 4 minutes you held, 2 minutes you exhale. This slowly keeps on increasing. Usually the ratio is 1:4:2. We cannot do that because our breathing is abnormal. First, deep breathing and Anulom Vilom will balance this. Then you can practice the timing properly. Usually, because there were no watches for the yogis, they used to use what is called matra. Matra means move your hand around the knee 3 times and do a snapping. That is called one matra. And by doing that, they used to measure how long the breathing is going on, because there is a rhythm. That is, on one side, automatically the matra can be counted. This counting is for the kala of the period of the breathing. So one is extent of the breathing, second is period of the breathings, and then there is a sankhya. Sankhya means 1:4:2 is the ratio. 1 second breathing in, 4 seconds holding inside, and 2 seconds exhaling. But this 1:4:2 ratio is of accomplished yogi. Normal people can't do it, because breathing for 1 minute and holding for 4 minutes requires enormous amount of practice and the guidance from the guru. Alone, it is never done. So once this is done, then he does 12 matra. That means this snapping and moving hand around the knee 3 times. If it is done 12, 12 is 12 matra. So then the 12 matras give jolt to the samana vayu once. So 12 matra gives one push to apana vayu, and that is called udghata. When matras are increased, you breathe in and keep the kumbhak longer and longer. 12 matra becomes 24 matra. Now you get 2 pushes or 2 udghat in this 24 matra pranayama. You make the matra 36. That is called tivra pranayama. You get 3 jolts. And then these are the jolts which open up the kundalini. Each of the jolts keeps opening the dwara. It is like the pranas or the vayu is going and trying to open the kundalini door. This is the door of the sushumna. Because now the pranas are ready, they are collected, they want a way to move up, and we are trying to direct it. A yogi is trying to direct it through the sushumna nadi. So he is pulling it from all other sources through a regulated breathing, and now with the udghata. Udghata is a push of the apana vayu. Then this vayu is let to go. The pranas are supposed to enter into the vajra nadi or the sushumna nadi. That is how the yogi progresses forward. Time taken for exhaling and inhaling is called matra. Once the master is there on this matra, then the yogi sits, and now he starts breathing as little as possible. The breathing goes down. down. Now you barely see his chest moving because he's breathing very little air inside, very little exhalation, a large kumbhak. So the kumbhak slowly occupies the space. And then, when the pranas are no more dissipated, when they are no more required, there is no activity of brain, heart, kidney, lung, everything is coming to standstill. The metabolism itself is coming to a standstill, as if you're frozen in time. At that point of time, the pranas assume their original power, and with that power, the yogi is able to work on the kundalini or redirection of his prana. Now, because pranas are concentrated and are regulated inside towards the Sushumna Nadi, at that point of time, the yogi starts becoming even unaware of his body because no pranas are going towards the skin. He is not aware that something is crawling on the skin. He is not aware that it is cold outside. He is not aware that the snow is falling because all these sensations are now without prana because the pranas have all gone inside. He doesn't have appetite. He doesn't feel hungry. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa sat in the motionless condition for 6 months. He didn't eat. His body was slowly emaciating. His ribs were seen from outside. His muscles were getting wasted. The crows and the birds were sitting on his head and pecking in his head. It is to bleed because of the repeated the pecking by the birds. He was not even aware. Some yogi walking around suggested the people that please open his mouth and put some food in his mouth, otherwise he will die because he is not aware of his body. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's mouth was opened with force. Inside was put some food. He swallowed it as a reflex. He was not even aware that he is swallowing it. That is why he has written in his biography, while talking to his disciple, he said, only Mahamaya knows how this body survived. Otherwise, no one can survive the amount of practice of sadhana that I have gone through. That is how a yogi, when he slowly moves in this, he is completely unaware of the body or the physical aspect. So that is what is called as prana gati vicheda, leading to kumbhaka, organizing the prana power, giving the jolts called udghata through 12 matras, 24 matras, 36 matras, which is called as manda, madhya, and tivra. With the tivra pranayama, the breathing becomes dirgha and sukshma. The avastha is called dirgha and sukshma, means prolonged breathing. And sukshma, subtle breathing, even awareness of breathing is lost. It's like a machine that is coming to a standstill. Slow movement. No awareness of the body, only awareness of the prana. Now he starts getting the visions. What is the effect of this pranayama? And this pranayama, precisely what it does when you achieve this kind of state, effects of ideal pranayama, and what is the state of Kevala Kumbhaka would be the subject of study for us for the next session. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Sanjay ji, wait for some questions.
Hari Om, Sanjay ji, this is Rajendran. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, basically, the pranayama is changing the or changing actually our gunas. Leave alone the technicalities. Basically, it is changing our gunas. Is it? Is it not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whichever way you go, yoga, through jnana yoga, through bhakti yoga, whatever, all we are doing is we are changing gunas, because gunas are the basis. Guna itself is prakriti. So it has to change. Any change that you try to bring in through any of the marga, whichever marga you adopt, ultimately you are trying to go away from tama and raja, making sattva stronger, and then going beyond sattva. Hari.
Hari Om. Thank you.
Sanjay ji, Hari Om. When you mentioned about this Anuloma Viloma, this can be done by physically closing the one nostril, or over a period of practice you can do it consciously?
Initially, we have to do it physical closing of one nostril, because we do not have control on the pranas of such a type that the respiration can happen only through one nadi and not through another nadi, Surya or Chandra. So we have to start initially with closing either with the thumb or with the little finger, the ring finger. So initially it has to be by doing the closure of that particular nostril. And as the yogi further practices it, he is able to do it by himself through one nostril and through another nostril. So they are able to open Chandra Nadi or Surya Nadi at their will. For example, many times when they are sitting in the hilly Himalayas and it is too cold, they emphasize on the Surya Nadi a lot, because of which they increase the temperature of the body, and they don't feel cold even if they don't have anything on their body. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Sanjay ji, can you connect this with the 29th verse which we learned last as a yajna?
Yes, yes. Prano jiyati. Prana. Prano jiyati apanaha. What is happening is prana and apana are what is the sacrifice of prana in apana and apana in prana? What is happening is apana, when it reverses its role, then what it is doing? From reversing the role, apana is supposed to be going downwards, adhogati. It becomes urdhvagati. And that apana, when it becomes urdhvagati, then it is sacrificed into the pranas. Similarly, prana, which are supposed to be urdhvagati, it becomes adhogati. So prana and apana, they meet at the Manipur chakra, at the Nabhi level, at the Samana Vayu level, and from there onwards, their coming together creates that udghat or the jolt that we talk. And that is how this jolt is created in 12 matras when it is a mrudu pranayama. As the pranayama becomes tivra, the jolts are more and more. And an adept yogi or a jnani who also later on understands this art of yoga very easily, they sit in meditation and immediately go into that state whereby they are able to again give that jolt, and then the meditation becomes complete. That is the time when the energy is so much. That's why a true yogi, when he comes out of meditation, he looks like a brilliant sun. Many people have described Gurudeva like that after his meditation. And it is not coming from anywhere else. It's coming because of the prana. The radiance that you see is because a part of that prana, when it comes on the skin, the luster changes. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to look so handsome that men, women used to climb on the trees to see him. Vivekananda's skin was called as a Suvarna Kanti by many people and his disciples. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa ultimately went to Durga Mata and said, Kalima, what the stupid thing you are doing? Take this handsomeness away from me because people are troubling me. And then it was taken away because Kalima is to listen to what he is to say. So that is why, as you rightly said, it is nothing else but apano jihati prana, prano jihati apanaha. Because now there is no prana, there is no apana. It all becomes one energy, because now it is getting directed through the opening of that Kali Nagin, the black serpent, 3.5 coiled, the Kundalini. And Kabir Maharaj has also given the cryptic significance to this in his Doha. अंबर में एक अमृत का कुआ, वहां काली नागन खेले जुआ, 8 मरेगा 9 धार. What is the meaning of this? If this is understood, Yoga Sutra is understood. Ambar में अमृत का कुआ, that means at Sahasrar Chakra the Amrut is there. जहां काली नागन खेले जुआ, Kali Nagan is Kundalini. Juwa means gamble. When it is directed outside world, she's gambling. When it is directed properly, then she becomes an energy. Ambar में अमृत का कुआ, जहां काली नागन खेले जुआ, 8 मरेगा 9 धार. 8 मरेगा. What is this 8? Ashtada Prakriti. All the Ashtada Prakriti will be dead. 9 dhar. What is that 9th element? The element of Kundalini. So this is how it is described. Hari Om.
Hari Om ji, just a clarification. I missed the, while trying to make notes. I understood till the point of, reducing the breathing, and then this, when the breath is forced upward, right? As in the jolts that you were referring to, and you referred to matras as the time taken, and 1 chutki is, so is this can you just explain that? Because how does this, we tried consciously, but this timing, it's obviously they're not doing it by hand, but how does it chutki, how do they measure it? Does it happen on its own, or is it accentuated?
The beginning, it is done by actually counting. Even the Tantu thread is also used to see the extent of breathing. That is at the beginning. As we keep practicing it, our mind notes the time, because they know by practicing, that this is 1 month. And then as you keep doing it, it gets almost automized. Sahaj avastha comes to that. Then as far as giving the jolt is concerned, remember, it is not the breath. The breath is only in and out. That is fine. Purak Rechak happens here, Kumbhaka happens here. Prana is not breathing. So the Vayu that is going up is called Vayu, but it is basically Prana. So Apana is the one which is going upwards now instead of downwards. That is why Brahmacharya is so important for a yogi, because Brahmacharya, if it is not, Apana goes down, because it is a perennial thing for ejaculation that is used. You stop that, then only it gets accumulated. Now it reversed. It has to be done. That Urdhva Mukhata comes because of the control of breathing through pranayama. Now it starts giving the jolt. The same power of it, when it is Adhomukha, helps us in evacuating the morning, as well as urination, as well as ejaculation or menstruation and delivering the baby. But the same power, when it is used in the reverse manner, now it is there to give the jolt, and the perineum receives the first jolt. That is why you must have seen again and again, there is emphasis on straight spine, because she is going to ascend upwards. A bent spine obstructs the flow of the energy. So yogi always sits, and that is why even as a straight line, the chin has to be this way, the spine has to be absolutely parallel, and that is described in detail in Hatha Yoga. Hari Om.
So is it, it's forced initially, right? It's directed by design.
Yes, but no, the direction of the flow happens automatically. It is the result of the breathing. It happens. The thing is, yogis see it with their eye. How do they come to know that upwards? Ramakrishna Paramahansa given the description up to Manipur Chakra. Yes, now it has gone up, and people have taken notes. Ramakrishna Paramahansa is the chamatkar of all times. He's the given the details of, because he had the authority to do so. Otherwise, this is normally disclosed except to the Shishya. So that is why even today, in spite of reading Patanjali, The real secrets of this yoga are only known to the guru and the chela, because it is for them, and for normal people, generally, they don't speak much about it. So it is a serious exercise because the results are stupendous. Hari Om.
G, one more thing, just on the calculation of the 5000 ml, I may have missed. So 3000 you said was the inhalation, and you mentioned about, yeah, and 1100 you mentioned was the exhalation.
Yes.
So there is 1000 which is there. You said, you mentioned, right? 500 and 5000, so 1/10.
Let me explain
the 1000 more. Yeah.
it again. When I breathe normally, which is abnormal breathing, I take 500 ml, 250. Normal, right? Now, when I go deep, I go beyond 250 by 3300. And when I exhale, I go 1100 plus 250. So total is 500 plus 3300 plus 1100, which is 4800. That is in breath, which is called as a complete vital capacity of this. I am talking medically. That's why if you must perimeter, where in perimetry, what do in that spirometry? In spirometry, put a tube inside you and they ask you to breathe. They're trying to see your breathing capacity, vital capacity. So if you see a runner, if you see a gym going person, if you see a fit person, they all have increased their respiratory capacity. The key to all games, football, volleyball, cricket, whatever you say, physical activity, the base, powerful lungs, deep breathing, not to talk about even swimmers. Michael Phelps had humongous capacity. His vital capacity was supposed to be 6 liters. You can read about it in Google. Because then you need to breathe very little. A powerful heart need not beat for 70 times. Usain Bolt's heart was beating for only 30 times. Our heart beats for 80 times. What is the difference? The powerful heart. A yogi breathes only for 2 times in a minute. We breathe 14 times. Why? His 2 breaths are powerful. That is the difference. Hari Om.
One last clarification, actually. So when we are born, we say the karma, Vayu is also, breaths are limited, right? So we have an X number of breaths. Now, 2 things that emerge here. One is, if it's limited, then can we increase the span of life? Because there are just that many breaths. And secondly is, when we exercise, right? We're told to exercise to increase the lung capacity. So by exercising, are we reducing the, are we finishing our breaths faster or earlier than before? So sorry, just maybe I've not understood just a little.
Both the aspect, let us get it cleared. First, the exercise thing. In exercise, you breathe pretty fast during the exercise period. For remaining 23 hours, that helps you in breathing slower. So it is a breathing faster. That is why when you do Bhasrika, you're doing, you're breathing faster. You're not reducing your life. You are increasing the tone and the capacity of breathing so that for the remaining part, you can breathe in a normal situation. You first land yourself in an abnormal situation of heavy load. So you keep running. You go breathless. Your respiration increases. But after the running of half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours is over, then your breathing comes down. Your normal breathing becomes much lesser. I can give you an example of my personal experience. When perfectly fitness is made and you do long runs, and I do long runs, and long I mean 20 kilometers and so, even now I do that. As a result, the pulse rate drops from 72 to as low as 42. No exaggeration, purely from personal experience. How did it happen? The fitness goes up. During running, 180, 170 is the pulse rate. Remaining period, 42. So that is how you increase the resistance power, the power of the organ. As far as karma is concerned, yes, number of breaths are decided by the previous karma. But the very fact that you want to do pranayama now is also a result of your past karma. If you have had inclination of being a yogi in the past birth, in this birth you will start acting upon it. So if you are getting the thoughts of doing breathing, pranayama, that means you have already started this as a part of your past karma only. You are a yogi in making. That is why when Abhedananda Maharaj came to meet Shashi Maharaj, Kali Maharaj, to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he looked at him and he said that, oh, you are an accomplished yogi, this is your last birth. So it is just the culmination of what you have done in the past. Otherwise, why would you spend early morning time and listen to Patanjali Yoga Sutra? Because you had will and inclination of your past karma that is bringing you here. Why in the entire India only few lakh people know Gurudeva? Others even do not know him because it is not in their karma. So it's all interrelated. Hari Om.
Hari Om. If no one has one last question, Sanjay ji, from the yogic perspective, we manage breath, we do the shwas, ashwas and pranaya, right? In the Buddhist tradition, you don't do this, but you observe the breath.
Yes.
No? So these processes, how are they linked? Because I know observation increases your awareness, like you mentioned in Vipassana, etc. Right? So you, for days on end, you just observe, and that increases your. So, I understand from a personal experience also the difference. But why are they interconnected? Is there
There's an absolute interconnection. When you try to control your mind through breathing, you are doing yoga. When you are trying to control your mind, the breath gets automatically controlled. That is called as Patanjali Pranayama. The difference is, one is more focused on controlling the mind first. Breath will automatically get controlled. The other is control the breath first. Mind will automatically get controlled. So those who are trying to observe the breath, they are trying to control the mind, and the pranas are getting controlled. Those who are trying to focus more on breathing, they are doing hatha yogic control of prana so that the mind will come under control. That is the only difference. Buddhist tradition is Patanjali Yoga Sutra, while the pranayama being focused more in hatha yoga, they say control prana, mind will come under control. Patanjali Maharaj says control the mind, pranas will come under control. That is why yoga chitta vritti nirodha is Patanjali Pranayama. Now, does that mean they are exclusive to each other? Not at all. You read any book of Hatha Yoga, they say Hatha Yoga is a preparatory stage for Raja Yoga. Hari Om.
Sanjay ji, one last question out of curiosity. Once the Kundalini is awakened and risen, on how it comes down, is automatically comes down or disturbances brings it down?
Again, when the Kundalini is being aroused, that is the time you are away from the world, you are completely gone inside. But if you are not able to maintain it for a time, you descend back into the world, it comes down. So keep trying. Then a stage comes when it reaches where it is supposed to reach, and then you get into Sahasavastha. So right now what happens, this world is one door, one room, and Kundalini and everything is another room. So you have to leave one room and come into the other room. But once you practice it and master it, once the Atma Darshanam is done, then you can stay in one room, but you can move into another room also. Gurudeva first left the room, that is world, went for meditation. After accomplishing the Brahma, after becoming Brahmavid, then he again came into the other room called world and did lot of work. So then you can, kabhi is ghar mein aa baithe, kabhi us ghar mein aa baithe. That is how the Sufi describes it. But till the time once you are completely able to protect yourself, you can go into war zone, no problem. But initially you are not protected, so you leave the war zone and go into the jungles. Then from there again you come back. It's a process. So that is why you descend down into the Kundalini while during the practice period. There is a meditation and suddenly it gets broken. Then meditation gets broken. Today it was 1 second, tomorrow it was 2 seconds. That is how, and that is sadhana. That is exactly what the sadhana means. Hari Om.